Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. As you guys can see, we have the Corvette behind us. We're going to be jumping right in on the LS9 swap, 2650 swap, whatever you guys want to call it. So today's video is going to be all about wiring. So there are a couple of wiring updates that we're going to have to do to the car so that we can use this LS9 equipment. And the main wiring that we're going to have to do is basically move all of the alternator wiring from the driver's side of the car to the passenger side of the car. Obviously, you're going to need your major power wire. You guys can see that big one over there. That actually ran to the fuse panel. We're going to have to chop that up, shorten that up. But that'll be for later down the road. But the main thing we need to do is actually get the fuse link. So this red wire, we're actually going to be removing that from the car. And the other thing we got to do is actually take the 3 wires for the alternator plug, which is actually that big plug right there. It's black with the orange surround, the orange gasket. There's 3 wires on there. What we'll be doing with that is basically taking advantage of the one wire. I think it's going to be the gray wire. We're going to use that gray wire to integrate into the LS9 alternator, and that'll basically be the voltage signal back to the ECU, and hopefully that goes back to the driver's information center, the gauge cluster. I'm pretty sure that's how that's going to work. I might correct that down below. Pretty sure it's the gray wire that we need. So, but the main story for today is removing this fusible link and moving those 3 wires from the driver's side over to the passenger side. All right, guys, I made really good progress on getting the alternator harness separated. You guys can see I've peeled back all the wiring up until it gets to this real thick wiring in the back. And that's kind of where I had to stop. You guys can see the red wire too. I did that a couple days ago, but basically the problem I'm running into is this wire harness behind the motor is taped on the outside. It's got convoluted tubing on the outside. Then it's got tape on the inside as well. And I basically can't get good access to it. So what I've decided to do is actually pull the wiring harness from the car. I've disconnected everything on the driver's side. What I'm going to do is disconnect everything, pull it up, try to get everything on basically from the passenger side head over. I want to get that, move that into on top of the motor so that I have really good access to it. All right, guys, I got the driver's side header removed, and as you guys can see, this is actually the driver's side of the engine harness all the way up to the ending at the ABS pump. So I did manage to get it out and back above the motor, like I said. There is a bell housing bolt right here. That bell housing bolt did have to come out. It was the very top one right below the driver's side head, so I had to pull that out. What I'm gonna do, I'm actually gonna slot this for future installs that you don't have to take the bolt all the way out. Just loosen up and you'll be able to pull it out one side. So I'll slot that. And yeah, so I just started kind of pulling the red wire back out. We got the main cap, that removed, and I'm just gonna keep going because eventually I'll get down to the bottom of the wiring harness and we'll get this thick red wire out. Oh, and I wanted to say, I've been very careful with an X-Acto knife because this is kind of the exact tool that I needed. You know, you're able to go in and poke and press up, poke and press up, poke and press up, and not cut any of the wires. So just being careful, you're able to get this done. So, all right, guys, you can see we have isolated the harness for the alternator. I pulled it all the way back, so this is gonna go pretty much in line with the passenger side harness. I'm not tearing this all apart. There's really no reason to. I just have pulled it aside. I pulled it as far back as I can. And you'll also see this is the oil pressure sensor switch, or the sending unit, whatever you want to call it. I covered that in this Tech Flex hose. This is the split loom version. Then we're gonna wrap it up with some Testa tape. So, all right, guys, we got the fusible link fully removed from the car. Boy, what a pain in the butt. Some cars I've seen, especially the CTS V2s, that is pretty much a separate wire and you don't have to cut it out of the harness. I mean, not that I had to cut it out of the harness, but I did have to split the loom, remove a lot of wiring. So I can actually cross another item off our list. Fusible link wire there. Actually, I think I had it twice. Move alternate, remove fusible link, so we did that. The alternator wire to the passenger side, so cool. We have crossed 3 things off our list, even though it's really kind of 2 of them were the same. But yeah, so as you guys can see, I reused the convoluted tube kind of like I was saying I was going to. And I just used the Tessa tape, like I said, and I pretty much put all new tape from the split here all the way down to the other split, which is here, and then pretty much all the way back to the frame rails. All right, so I have finally finished up the driver's side harness, even though we are over on the passenger side. We used our Tech Flex loom, we used the Tessa tape, and we got everything wrapped up. So, all right guys, we've run into another wiring project, another wiring update, whatever we want to call it. And basically what that's going to be is the AC compressor clutch. You guys can see I have the wire ran, not obviously the correct way. It doesn't go across the alternator. It doesn't go around the valve cover either like it does on the LSA, LS3, or LS2. What actually happens, it actually goes around the driver's side of the engine, across the frame rail, down underneath the frame, and up. So I'll actually include a picture of what we're talking about here. This is from Brian Lambert over on the 01 Everything group, and I want to give him a shout out for basically helping out with this wiring issue. And yeah, you guys can see that wiring goes down across the cradle, back up, and basically up until where the AC compressor switch is. So unfortunately, when I cut apart the driver's side of the harness, you're also going to have to cut apart the passenger side of the harness. And you guys know that I had the driver's side completely out because I had taken it off of the ABS pump, all the sensors down below, the crank trigger, the cam trigger, all that stuff down below. I disconnected all of that. I had it sitting up above the motor. That would have been the perfect time to cut up this passenger side harness, moved it from this side, ran it back behind the head and into that harness down below. So if you guys are doing an LS9 swap into a LS2, LS3 car, be aware there's two things you're going to have to cut up. One, you're going to move the alternator plug from the driver's side to the passenger side. That's the obvious. What I found out about was moving the AC plug from the passenger side to the driver's side. So, alright guys, you can see the gray connector that's highlighted by the flashlight, and it's got that green and black wire. I very just haphazardly kind of ran it in the direction it needs to go. And guys, you can obviously see we're way short on trying to get it down here. Alright guys, I think I finally figured out how we're going to do this. We're just going to run it the OEM way, the way the LS2, LS3 cars are. There's a little bit of a gap on the alternator bracket. And if you guys can see, I'm going to try to pull on the wire. There's no tension here. If you guys can see that, there's no tension here. So that's not the OEM way, but guys, that's just going to be so much extra work. I'd have to add heat shrink tubing. I do have to tape the loom back up, but taping that takes, I don't know, 30 minutes, 45 minutes at max. And plus, my loom was looking kind of crappy, so I'll use as much of the loom that I have as well as the new Tessa tape that I have as well. All right, guys, you can see I have the passenger side all fully back together. You'll see that I replaced the crappy loom with this new Tech Flex for the throttle body. Everything else just had simply too many wires for the Tech Flex, so I just used the same tape that I used on the driver's side, the Tessa tape. And if you guys can see more clearly, you'll see that I was able to run Tech Flex with the two wires all the way down past the alternator bracket and down into the air compressor. And if you guys look down there, you'll see that the Tech Flex runs all the way down and it's into the AC compressor clutch. Now, if I run into a problem, guys, what I did do, I did run that whole wire separately. So you guys see this Tech Flex hose running parallel to the OEM wire. Well, this is the AC line. So if I have to, I can always unplug it, untuck it from the valve cover and the alternator bracket, and then run it that way. Then I'd be able to run it that way down. Cut the wire, lengthen it, run it down like I was talking about earlier. So that is one option I still have. All right, guys, continuing where we left off, as you guys can see, we've made a ton of progress. We've actually pretty much completed every project on the car except for wiring the supercharger, the coolant, the fuel, the supercharger itself. All those projects have been done except for the wiring. So with that being said, there's basically 4 or 5 sensors you got to worry about. The MAF, the MAP, the IAT, the engine coolant, and then the fuel purge solenoid. So we're going to go over those real quickly. MAF sensor. As you guys can see, we do have a adapter plugged in. This is from Caspers. So that is a LS2 to LS3 with a IAT Breakout. So this is a harness we are going to have to extend. I'm going to have to get maybe, I don't know, 10 inches of wire, extend the IAT sensor, and plug it into the LS9 lid. So this MAP sensor uses the LS1, LS2 style wire harness. So I was just able to buy a straight adapter. I think I got 33 inches, something like that. And that back behind the blower lid, you can actually see it kind of right here. And so the MAP sensor is plugged in. So that's 2 sensors. Third sensor is going to be the evap Purge Solenoid. As you guys can see, your connector's here on the passenger side, but the Purge Solenoid is over here on the driver's side. I had bought this sensor extension from Caspers. I thought it was going to be long enough, but obviously it's not. So you've got 2 ways you could solve this. One, you could actually take the fuel evap Purge Solenoid, take that out of the harness, and run it to the driver's side, kind of like we did on the alternator harness. Obviously, in my case, I already have that adapter. I'm just going to cut the wire and extend it. Now, I do think there are longer fuel evap Purge Solenoid adapters out there, but honestly, guys, I already bought that harness. I think it was like $8. Just going to go ahead and extend it. So if you guys, like I said, if you want to eliminate that, maybe move this part of the harness over to the driver's side when you have it torn apart. Like I said, I already bought the harness. We're just going to extend that. So since we're running the larger 112 and we're running an LS9, everything got pushed forward. And unfortunately, my throttle body harness, it's literally like 2 inches short. So, you know, you could cut the harness, try to extend it, try to pull it more, or you could already buy the throttle body extension harness. I actually had this from an earlier project. So all I did was had to repin it to the correct pin because I had a 102 that I installed earlier, but it didn't work because it was pinned wrong. So I repinned it back to the right colors and I plugged that in. So throttle body's good to go. Now the next sensor is going to be the engine coolant temp sensor. Your factory harness should plug right in, but mine actually have an issue. And that issue is I actually have a broken clip. So I'm going to swap the end of this harness for a new plug that's not broken. I'll be honest, guys, I think since this is sitting right next to the header, it just got hot, and when I pulled it off, it broke. So swap that out. So I actually have 2 more things to go over. One is going to be the E85 flex fuel sensor. You guys know that I used to have it up here. It used to be powered by a coil pack. Well, as you guys can see, my harness has fallen apart quite gloriously over the last couple years. So this sensor is actually from DSX Tuning, so Dave Steck Tuning, and the sensor works just fine, but I'm going to have to move it because, like I said, I'm going to have to extend these wires because, like I said, I moved the sensor from over here to down here. So the power cord is going to have to basically be extended, I don't know, 5 or 6 inches. So this alternator right here is going to be the biggest pain because this alternator is a PWM. It's pulse width modulation controlled. And obviously my LS2, LS3 ECM will not control a pulse width modulation adapter. For that, we have this box. It's basically an adapter controller box for a 2-pin GM alternator controller. This is by SpeedMax Innovation. And so yeah, they gave us this adapter control box, and there's really only 2 connectors. Well, there's 3. So the 2 connectors are the pink, that's going to be switch 12 volt power. The black, that is going to be your ground. And that brown wire will connect to this adapter harness right here. This harness will plug into your alternator like this. And this basically is what's going to control the LS9 alternator. So you've got that harness here, brown to brown. Basically what that adapter box is telling the alternator to do, it's basically giving it a command to pull, I think it's either 14.5 or 14.8 volts. You can actually specify that when you order it from SpeedMax Innovation. And I'll be honest, I went over that with him. I told him I've got large fans, external pumps, all that. So we went with either 14.8 or 15 volts, something like that. And that's what the alternator will be commanded to do. The 3 connectors from the ECM will no longer control the alternator. So we might have to do some fiddling around with HP tuners and disabling fault codes and stuff like that, because basically the alternator will no longer be controlled by the ECM. So as I mentioned earlier, we moved the alternator wiring to the passenger side for one reason. Basically, that's that gray wire. You see this open terminal here? What I'm going to do is I'm going to run that wire and connect it to this gray wire on the LS3. So that should get us our voltage on the driver's information center. Because basically, we will send the signal that's telling how many volts are being produced from the car to the car itself, to the ECM, to the BCM, and to the driver's information center on the dashboard. I am going to make a separate video because I'm actually going to eliminate the power relays and all that for the A&A Fuel system, because as you guys know, all that stuff was powered from the driver's side. Well, unfortunately, the alternator is now on the passenger side, and I don't want, I think I had 3 relays, 3 blocks, and all that. I don't want to deal with any of that. So what we're going to do, we're actually going to replace that with this MSD solid state relay. They sell these in, I actually picked up the high current. They sell a standard version too that comes in red or black. And yeah, so basically what my plan is, I'm going to run a wire from either the alternator or the fuse box over to the driver's side fender. I'm going to have this inside the fender, and we're going to run our vacuum block and all that system off here. So we'll have one power wire coming in, and then I believe the Hobbs switches will trigger it from ground. I think that's right, from ground. And yeah, so if you guys want to see that A&A Fuel system update, you know, we're going to have a whole separate video on that. All right, guys, so I have wired in the ignition circuit wire. This is going to a switch 12 volt, like we said. So I actually already had a tap fuse going into the fuse box, so I just decided to use that. Like I said, there is a constant 12 volt here on the side of the fuse panel or the alternator itself, but like I said, it did say ignition, so I know that this is hot at all times, but the fuse box, the particular fuse we're going to be using, is a switch 12 volt. So, and then I've got our ground done, and that will go down here. If you guys look by the strut, there is a ground down there. So that's going to be our power and ground. Now for that other wire on the alternator plug, basically the gray connection I was telling you about earlier, I actually went ahead and picked up, this is a Bosch Kompakt 1.1, and it's 2 female. So anyway, like I said, I bought an entire new connector because I couldn't find the individual pin, and there was a motorcycle place. I'll drop it on the screen down below where I actually got this extra connector at, because I reached out to Andrew Maxwell. He's the owner of SpeedMax, and he actually was out of these connectors and fittings. So yeah, so I ended up just going ahead and buying a complete new connection. But we don't need it. I just need the terminal and the little weather plug. As you guys can see, there's the terminal and the weather seal right there. Now this is similar to a weather pack connector, but this is specifically a Bosch Kompakt connector. All right, guys, I don't know if this was supposed to work properly, but my weather pack connector crimper little tool worked just fine. It got the small connector right there. It got the clamp around the seal. You do want to make sure this goes in the right way, because these alternator connectors, you know, it could potentially be the wrong side up. So, all right, guys, you'll see that we have our plug for the alternator plugged in. We've got our black and brown wires. You'll see that the black wire, I did end up soldering it to the gray wire because that's the signal going to the ECM. The orange wire and then the red and white striped wire, I just folded in on itself and I heat shrink tube it. So that should be waterproof and won't arc on anything. So we're going to wrap that in some Tech Flex hose. And then you'll see the brown wire, I haven't clipped it yet, but basically I'm going to run it in the same Tech Flex hose up until we get back to the firewall. Then we have a offshoot branch coming down, and I think I'm going to go around the ice tank, up and back forward to the control box up here. You'll notice that I have the IAT extension. We got that all wired up and loomed, so that's good to go. The evap Purge solenoid, you can't really see it, it's down here where that red plug is. That's all been wired up. That extension's been made. And the battery cable, I actually will have this in the next video. I actually crimped the battery cable and put new heat shrink tubing on it, and we got that tightened down on the alternator. So the alternator is 100% done, as well as those 2 lines that we had to extend. Basically just add probably 12 inches and maybe 6 inches to the other sensor. Those lines, those have all been completed. So let's go ahead and mark our project off. So wiring alternator adapter, that has been done. Finalize wiring and adapters, that's been done. And the only thing left on this list is test, fire, tune, and validate the alternator's working. So we're not quite to that point yet. We still have the whole fuel system to take care of. And as I showed you earlier, we have to wire in this MSD box. So we're actually going to include that in the next video. So if you guys want to see that fuel system wiring in an MSD box installed, make sure you hit that like button. Also hit the subscribe button and turn on your bell notifications. And if you guys want to help support the channel, check out the links all down below. Like I said, I'll try to include all the part numbers, all the extension harnesses, everything that we've used today for this wiring project. And also make sure you check out our website, bonecrusherss.com. Because you know, we've got a tune to pay for coming up. Actually, have to pay for 2 tunes. Probably have to pay for a fire up tune as well as the actual chassis dyno tune. So any contributions you make on our website will go right back into the channel and that project as well. So thanks, guys. Have a great one.